And welcome to Habs Unfiltered, episode 173. I am your host, Blaine Pudvang. I'm joined now by my co-host, Matt Smith.
Good morning.
And Treg Wilson.
Good morning.
What a wonderful weekend it is. Not much going on. It's pretty good.
It's been pretty dead in the Habs news.
Yeah, nothing's happened whatsoever.
Boring.
It's not like the captain has been rumored to have his career end or anything like that.
That was rumored in 2020 by what's his face there? Kyprios. Yeah.
He was a man ahead of his time.
He was actually.
If you tweet something once every year for 10 years, eventually it could happen. That's basically where we're at. All right, so yeah. So let's just jump into this. This episode is the Shea Weber episode. As everybody may or may not be aware of, Shea Weber played hurt the entire playoffs. And there is a laundry list of injuries. The biggest one recently is his hand injury that everybody knew about, needing surgery. So he's going to be receiving surgery on his hand. It's going to take a while to recover. He also has ankle, foot, hip, whatever else injuries. There's a laundry list, and the Canadiens are going to put him on long-term injury reserve, according to Renaud Lavoie of TVA, who he's usually correct on stuff like this. The Canadiens, when they don't want to release something publicly themselves, they normally trust someone like Renaud to release the information. So I trust that information to be correct, because in the past it has been. So with Weber hurt, out for a year, maybe looking at retirement, this is the episode that we're going to kind of delve into that. So Matt, we're going to start with you. Give us your point of view on why other NHL teams are so butthurt that Shea Weber might go on long-term injury, and they're gonna fight him.
Well, you look at Shea Weber, and we knew that he had that hand injury, and he came out there and he played like a warrior during the playoffs. Like during the 22 games that we saw him play, he was out there. He was throwing hits. Obviously, he wasn't putting up the big points or anything like that because of the injury. He wasn't shooting as much. But, he averaged over 25 minutes a game, and he was everything you want to see in a captain. And when it comes to this injury, it was kind of blindsided me a little bit, and I'm sure it blindsided every fan. But when it comes to why people are butthurt about this is some people think that they're trying to go around the cap. Some people are trying to think that they're going to put him on long-term injured reserve and then try to eat that money and do the whole Kucherov thing and all that kind of stuff, which
nobody ever does. Ever.
Yeah, right. Well, that's not what they're trying to do. If it happens that this hand injury, the knee injury, the ankle injury, etc., those pile up to this guy getting pushed into retirement, a lot of people are more butthurt over the fact that it's not going to cost the Canadiens money. It's going to cost them about $500K. It's going to cost Nashville money for the recapture penalty based on the contract that they signed way back when.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the recapture, the recapture stuff here in a little bit. We're going to just stay on the injuries for now.
I just don't think people should be this isn't a guy that fakes injuries. This is a guy that has played through what we saw it during the playoffs, and we saw it the last time he busted his ankle up and played most of a season with that injury, and then all of a sudden they just got to the point where they needed to shut him down. Canadians weren't going very far anyway, and they ended up shutting him down because of it. I don't know why all the social media hate is out there for Weber and on the Canadians right now regarding this situation. I know there's obviously trolls out there and everything, but as I said, like Weber's not a guy that's going to go out and fake injuries, and the organization isn't going to just try to say, oh yeah, he's got this and try to use this money. It is really seeming like it's a scary situation. This is this guy's livelihood. This is his career. And as I said, it could push him right into a retirement situation.
Well, earlier in the season, the press were all over Marc Bergevin when he was talking about he had a couple of press conferences, and they kept asking him, well, Weber seems to be playing hurt. Why don't you sit him? Why isn't he resting? And to that, Bergevin responded, you tell him that he can't play. Good luck.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of player that he is. If there's any chance that he can play, he will. And good luck stopping him.
Yeah.
Because
and with how he played during the playoffs and the minutes that he ate up, I wonder what he would have looked like if he would have been at health.
Oh, yeah, it would have been impressive had he been even 80%. Well, it could have been a completely different series.
Yeah.
What about you, Treg?
I think I know there's a lot of the rumor from Elliot Friedman on his 31 Thoughts was there's some teams that are calling bullshit on the Weber injuries. Now, I'm going to take that little statement with a grain of salt because Marc Bergevin is a pretty respected GM in the NHL. Like, some people may think he's not, but he's pretty respected by other GMs in the NHL. Shea Weber, like you said, isn't the type of player to say, oh, I have injuries. If that was the case, then he would have sat out most of the season with his injuries. He wouldn't have played. He wouldn't have said, if I can play, Weber's type of player, if I can play 56 to 60%, I'm good to go, and I'm going to play. Like, the doctor pretty much has to go to Weber and say, you are not playing, and that's final. And even then, I think it's an argument. But
yeah, it's a blow dart situation. You hit him with a blow dart to knock him out.
Yeah.
That's basically what you'd have to do.
So, and it gives me thought to believe just by the way the players reacted to Weber when the series was over. They all kind of came over to him and consoled him, and almost like, this could have been your last chance to get to the final, and we're sorry we didn't win it for you. But I'm going to throw this spin on it. It's all speculative right now of how long Weber's going to be out and whether it's retirement worthy or not. I mean, all we have is he's either going to miss a full year due to surgeries, and maybe they piled up enough to retire. So without putting the cart before the horse, let's just wait and see what the actual news is, because he went to see the doctor, I believe, yesterday for the second opinion, or the day before. And Montreal has not announced it they're not going to before the expansion draft anyway. They're not going to come out and say, but they will have to have something today. So we know who's protected, who's not, and whether or not Weber's going to be on the LTIR, because that'll affect whether or not, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that'll affect whether or not can be protected or not.
Well, he's not going to be placed on the LTIR until the season begins. So until then, he's just going to sit there. But Pierre LeBrun has already put out that the Canadiens will not be protecting Shea Weber in the expansion draft. And this is where that whole other GMs are crying bullshit. They think it's some kind of, the word is, according to Elliot Friedman on his 31 Thoughts podcast, is that the Canadiens are doing this to circumvent some of the rules around the expansion draft. And to that I say, if he's unprotected and you don't believe them, call them on their bluff. Fucking pick him. If you think they're circumventing, pick them. Go ahead.
And that's what I say. I'd like to know what GMs are saying that, and if they're really kind of saying that. Like,
probably Julian Brisebois.
I'm not saying Elliot Friedman's a liar. Like, I don't think he's a liar.
No. He is. When he puts out something, it's double sourced. And
yeah. But then again, I got to think I just don't see GM saying that, knowing the reputation of Weber and Bergevin. I just don't see
I could
why.
see a couple GMs being a little bit skeptical and
Leery,
even
skeptical.
saying shit like that because they're pissed off. I can totally see it.
And that's fine. Like, I agree with you. If you think he's not hurt or you think he's going to play, draft him, pick him, take him, go ahead. We still save the money on, it's really a no loss situation for the Canadians, except we lose Weber in the dressing room, of course. But other than that, money wise, it's no loss situation.
Yeah. So, and the LTIR thing, they have to wait until the season begins before he can go on it officially. And the league is going to review this more strictly than others. I mean, Luongo's because of Luongo's cap recapture, before he tried to retire early. They did a full investigation. So if there is a retirement situation with Weber, they will walk through it because there are cap recapture rules that come into place. Now, we've kind of, I don't know. Do you guys want to jump into the cap recapture now, or do you have more
Might
to
as
say?
well. We've already talked about it. You might as well.
Okay. So with the cap recapture, Treg, you did something for Hockey Writers. You broke it down a little bit.
So with the cap recapture, which actually kind of changed a bit since it first came out in the last CBA. So if he's forced to retire, he would be retiring on the 2021 season, or sorry, the 21-22 season. So the recapture penalty to Nashville is going to be $4.9 million for the next 5 years for the remainder of his contract. So that means that's a cap hit of $4.9 million that's going to affect the Nashville Predators. That's a player. That's at least one good third line player that really they're paying nothing for. Montreal, I think, is $584,000 or something like that.
Matt, you had the number. You looked at that, didn't you?
Yeah, I would say it's 4.9 for Nashville, and I believe it's like 500, just like 540,000, 550,000, something like that for Montreal.
And that's for only 1 year. Montreal only has to pay that for the 1 year, I believe. I don't think they have to pay
it's for the whole. It's for
is
the
it
whole
for the
thing.
5? Okay.
Yeah.
So what that entails is that if you really think about the recapture penalty, now with the new CBA, when they extended the CBA, they changed the recapture. Because if Weber were to stay on, and you got to remember, Weber still has money owed to him. So Weber could sit there and say, I'm not retiring, but you can put me on LTIR for the next 5 years, right? Because Weber still has, mind you, it goes 6-3-1-1-1, I believe.
Yeah.
6 million, 3 million, 1-1-1. But he still gets 6 million owed to him next year. And then 3 million. And then, so he could wait essentially till 23-24 when he gets, 24-25 when he gets down to those $1 million. Oh no, 23-24 because it's 3. And then the cap recapture for Nashville is $8 million. $8.1 million per season. Now, because of the big heavy hit, and this really comes into play if he retires at 25-26, because it's 24.5 million per season, well, for the one season, is now with the new rules is the Predators are allowed to take those bigger ones and stretch them over 4 or 5 years after Weber's retired. So it'll take that 8 million, say, all right, he has 3 years left at, I don't really have the numbers to say how much per year, but you're still going to owe, say, 2 million per year for the next 5 years. But then you're paying for Weber long after his contract's over.
If he stays on the long-term injury reserve for the entirety of the contract, there will be no cap. There will be no penalty.
No, there will be no penalty. And if he stays on LTR with Montreal, Montreal can get the 7.8 million relief every year for Weber.
Yeah. If
they trade him to Nashville, which
I was going to bring that up. So
if go ahead.
So just to finish it off, it's a sliding scale with the cap recapture. With that $24.3 million to Nashville, it gets split up by however many seasons are remaining. And if he waits until the end, they get nothing. So there's some incentive for the Canadians to keep him on LTIR for the remainder of his contract if he cannot play anymore. But there's also, Treg?
There's a bigger incentive to trade him to Nashville, because if Nashville gets him and he goes on LTIR, they pay absolutely nothing, and they get a 7.8 million cap relief every year towards their roster. Montreal say 7.8 million a year because they don't have Weber's contract on their books anymore. So it's kind of a win-win for both teams. And Montreal can win even further because they can sit there and say, all right, you can have Weber back, but now I'm going to pick and choose who I want to come my way because we're doing you guys a huge, huge favor. So it'll be more of Bergevin looking at Poyle and saying, I want this or this. And if you don't give it to me, you're not getting them.
What do you think, Matt? What do you think would be in a deal like that, if the Canadians were to trade him to Nashville, what would you try to do?
As Treg said, you got to get your maximum value back. Bergevin's got to kind of be cut. Not I say he's just got to be cutthroat with it, but you got to look at trying to get your maximum value out of whatever deal. Like as Treg alluded to, both teams would save that cap money. One on the LTIR and one just losing them off the books. So, yeah, you got to be aggressive. You'd have to be aggressive in that situation. You couldn't just dangle it for like a 7th round pick and just say, "Hey, we're trying to help you guys out to be the nice guy."
I would say, oh, sorry.
I'm not going to say like put your foot into Foley's neck or anything and just hold him down, but they would have to get something out of it because they, as said, they'd be really helping Nashville out. In either situation, either they'd be saving the 7.8, 7.9 million, whatever it is, or they'd be saving the 4.9 if he retires. So, yeah.
Personally,
I
would not want to.
Paying the 4.9 if he retires.
I wouldn't want to make the trade to Nashville. I would rather keep him. If I were to make the trade to Nashville, I'd demand like a Dante Fabro.
I said you'd have to get somebody.
Yeah.
You have to get somebody big.
If Philip Forsberg had moratorium, I think I'd demand Philip Forsberg for him, but he only got 1 year left, so you're.
But I wouldn't even trade Weber at this point. Even if he stays on LTIR the remainder of his contract, there is more of a benefit to the Canadians to have that cap, that LTIR space, because the Canadians are a cap team.
Yeah.
So being able to go beyond the cap would be beneficial to the Canadians.
Yeah.
Whereas
I wouldn't want to move him either. It's just in that situation, if they did move him, that's what my thoughts would be.
I personally don't think Oh, go ahead.
But that's why for me it would cost so much for them to take him back from me, because as a cap team, that cap space you get from the LTIR is more beneficial to me as the GM of a cap team.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think Montreal trades him. I don't think they, regardless. I think Nashville Poyle's going to come running to Bergevin going, hey, buddy, why don't we do ourselves a favor? And if that's the case, that's going to have to be a pretty sweet goddamn deal if I'm Bergevin too. And we all know Bergevin's pretty savvy with his trades and his asset management. So Fabro, to me, if they dangle Fabro in his face, then that's something if I was Bergevin, I'd sit back and go, okay, now we're kind of in the same kitchen here to make a move. And if I were Bergevin, I'd ask for Fabro plus. So
listen, we still don't know what's going on. Like, this is a situation that we haven't really seen across the league very often. The last time that we saw this was with Luongo, right?
Yeah.
With
Luongo
him, with Florida having to eat money and Vancouver having to eat money. Well, Pronger, they didn't have to eat any money because the contract was traded. Right?
But I'm talking about using long-term injury for a big star capital, for a long period.
And you have to remember.
But there wasn't any capture penalties for those teams. Yeah.
And you have to remember too, with LTIR, it has to be approved by the NHL and NHLPA. It's not like the team can just go, oh, this guy's hurt, we're putting him on LTIR. They got to go, this guy's hurt. This is what the issue is. This is how long he's going to be out. And then the NHL is going to investigate that, use their own doctors to determine whether or not that this is a legit.
And
LTIR.
they're going to scrutinize it that much more based on the fact that it's going to hurt another team.
Correct. So, I mean, like if you go back to the Jeffrey Lupul scenario with Toronto, I kind of I'm not sure if Lupul was as hurt as I mean, he
Well,
could ski and snowboard, so I don't know why he
he's
couldn't play
posting
hockey.
Instagram stories of him snowboarding
Yeah.
on a hip injury that he's being. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's on
So-
Robidas Island, right?
He
So-
also came out and he talked about the organization being corrupt and fucking whatever else, right? But
However, Lupul didn't have a recapture penalty, so
No.
it's just basically this now is it's not. It just affected Toronto. It helped Toronto.
yeah, the
but it
recapture
affected-
penalty's only been used twice.
This will be the last time it'll be used because there's
no,
more
there's
contracts.
3 or 4 players total in the league that have one.
Okay, I thought this was the last one.
Crosby's
only
another
one-
player that has a cap recapture.
The only one I can think of is Luongo and Mike Richards. Those are the only two I can think of. Off the top of my head, those are the only two I can think of. Because they terminated Richards' contract and now they're getting hit for like 16, 17 years or something like that. But the recapture is only like 5 years. And
Well,
Didn't Kovalchuk have one?
Who?
Kovalchuk, when he retired.
Yeah.
Wasn't he
So
on,
anybody who signed a long-term deal, like
That was
10 or more
front-loaded.
years under the old CBA, has a cap recapture. So Crosby's going to have a cap recapture.
no. I
penalty.
mean ones that are actual active. That's what I
Yeah.
meant.
Crosby's active.
No. I mean that
I meant the players
actual
retired.
players retired,
Yeah.
and now the
Yeah.
cap is actually being used.
Oh,
Right?
well,
I don't think we're going to see Crosby be bought out anytime soon or jump into
No.
retirement or anything
No.
like that. So
but yeah, so back to the investigations. I mean, they've been pretty lax with allowing long-term injury reserve for a lot of different teams. We've seen it recently. But this year, like you said, because there's money involved that's going to affect other teams, they are going to have teams of doctors and lawyers look into this. So I see this as a marketing tool for the Canadians now. I mean, you look at Tampa Bay, they had the T-shirts made up of 18.5 cap space. Well, I think it's time the Canadians make some T-shirts.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming we're going to segue into our next little cap space portion of our show.
Sure, let's do that.
So Weber might not be the only player going on LTIR. Jonathan Drouin could be another player who still is, could be another player staying on LTIR, which frees up another $5.5 million for the Canadians. Now, Drouin could be left unprotected, could be picked up by Seattle. There's another, either way, the $5.5 million will come off the books if he's traded, or you get the $5.5 million relief. Because you got to remember, when someone's on LTIR, their salary cap is not taken off the cap. It's still there. You just get above and beyond your cap total of whatever that person's salary was for the season. So I was confused with this, and someone who knows the cap better than I do said, Weber's $7.8 million will not come off the cap. You're just going to get $7.8 million over the cap in relief because you can't use that player.
Which is
So-
why earlier I mentioned that's more of
Yeah.
a benefit to the Canadians.
Correct.
Yeah.
As a cap
So-
team.
I got a question. Probably a stupid one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Drouin's still on the LTIR.
Yes.
So when it comes to expansion, does he get pulled off the LTIR, or is he still on the LTIR?
No.
Because
What happens?
how would you pick a player that's on the LTIR?
Because they can.
They can't unless Montreal can prove that Drouin's going to miss 60 games in the next season. Right now, then if they can prove he's going to miss 60 games, then he's exempt.
Yeah, he's
per se.
ineligible. Yeah, he's ineligible.
However, if they can't prove it, then whether he's on LTIR or whatever, he
Right.
can still be picked
Right.
up by the.
And even if
by Seattle.
even if they could prove that he can miss 60 games, Seattle could still pick him because it's their prerogative.
Okay.
They
Gotcha.
are entitled to pick the guy if they feel he can come back eventually.
Gotcha.
So we'll stick with the cap space. We'll get on to lists here in a little bit. So Drouin, Weber, you look at the cap space that they're going to have. Anyway, the Canadians are looking at about $24 million in cap space next season. For a team that made the Stanley Cup final, that's significant.
So I had this in my article as well.
You did.
So with Weber being out on the LTIR and losing a player to expansion draft, You have between 27.9 million, as high as 27.9 million, and as low as 24.8 million. Now, I did this assuming that Druin was the high point of the guy being selected, and Kulak was the low point of the guy being, because Kulak had the lowest cap hit for guys that I believe will be left unprotected. This also changes if Druin doesn't get protected and gets put on LTIR. So if they say I'm going to say Allen, because that seems to be the popular name of the what everyone thinks they may take. So Allen's what, 2.5, 2.8 next year. So you're still looking at 7.8 million plus 5.5 million plus 2.8 million. So you're adding all that together and you're looking at 7, 8, 9, another 16 million on top of the 14 million they have. So you're almost $30 million in cap space going into next season. And that's a significant amount of caps. Well, again, it's not cap space, but 30 million available money.
Spendable money.
Spendable money going into next season. This is a big plus, I think, for Montreal. This is a huge, huge plus for Montreal because they pretty much have the money to go out and sign whoever the hell they want and fill the holes that they need to fill on both the left side wing and defense, although they have 2 spots on defense now to fill instead of 1. But
well, they got to be careful too. They can't just go out and spend money like Treg Wilson in a foreign port. Drunken sailor joke.
True.
No, but they got to be careful. They got to pick and choose what they're going to spend on because they have guys they need to retain. They have specific holes that need to be filled. So they do need to be careful on that. But I want to move from that to the protection list. So today we're recording. It's Saturday the 17th. The protection lists are going to be put in later today, and they'll be released publicly tomorrow, Sunday. We're going to have our full expansion draft show recorded on Monday afterwards. But for now, I'm going to look at predictions. So, Matt, which system do you think the Canadians are going to pick? A 7-3-1 or an 8-1?
7-3-1.
Because of Weber.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with Weber out, there's no reason to stick to that. 8-1. Treg?
Before Weber, I would have said 8-1 hands down. But I actually wrote an article about that. That's total shit now. But 7-3-1 is what they're going to go. I think they're going to go. It's the logical sense of what they're going to go with. It makes no sense to go 8-1 with Weber being left unprotected. So you're not protecting Kulak. So
no, I agree. Now, Matt, clearly Price is the goalie everyone's protecting because he has the no move clause. On defense, Petrie has the no move clause. But who are the other 2 defensemen you're going to protect?
She's got to be Sherrod Edmondson, in my opinion. Like obviously there's the chance that you lose somebody like Fleury, you lose somebody like Kulak, etc. Or you possibly lose Weber. But yeah, I don't think you could lose either of those guys right now for nothing, in my opinion.
I don't think either you or I would switch from that, Treg?
Yeah.
Those 3?
Yeah. No. I personally believe Sherrod's getting picked. I know a lot of people think Allen because of 7-3-1, he's the most, but with Ben Bishop now waiving his no move clause to go, I just don't see, when you can get a defenseman like Sherrod, I don't see Seattle picking a backup goalie off Montreal when they can just grab a backup goalie from anywhere. So at a cheaper price.
Yeah, and before we get back to the Weber stuff, I want to stick on this for a moment. Do you both feel, and I'm going to start with Matt, do you guys feel that it's better for the Canadians to just say, screw you, Seattle, pick whoever the frig you want? Or do you go out and you throw good money with the bad and try and pay them more assets for them to not pick the guy? Matt, what do you think?
Depends on who really depends on who they're targeting.
Well, if you look at the social media posts, everybody thinks it's Jake Allen, which I don't know. With the goalie market as it is, with everyone who's exposed, I'm not too sure Jake Allen is their main focus.
Yeah.
But let's pretend it is.
Well, Jake Allen did phenomenal things for the Canadians. He provided solid backup goaltending to Carey Price and really helped the Canadians down the stretch to even make the playoffs. However, they gave up a third and a seventh to get him. You got to start looking at obviously the market to see who else is out there, who else could possibly be brought in, and know when enough is enough as to how much you want to put in asset wise to keep him around for a couple more years.
Well, do you think the market is so weak that it's worth the rumored first and third to Seattle for them to not pick Allen?
No, I would say there's options out there that they could jump at, or there could be a deal made with another team to bring somebody else in to help carry Price out for the season. I love Jake Allen. I really do. I would love to keep him, but if you're giving up futures plus, you've got to kind of draw a line in the sand.
I think a first, and I think that's way too much for Jake Allen. I mean, if you look at the UFA list, depending on how much you want to spend, you got Jonathan Bernier, David Riddick, James Reimer, Antti Rantna. You have guys that can fill Jake Allen's spot. Yaroslav Halak. You could take a chance on Corey Snyder or Mike Smith if you want. Brian Elliott. Brian Elliott's a solid backup. So, I mean, there's a lot of Charlie Lindgren's available. Like,
he just happens to be a net when they lose games. It's not his fault.
Don't just ignore the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a lot of UFA goalies. I mean, Marzek only made $3.1 million last year. Bernier only made $3 million. That you can still get for probably the same amount of money, maybe a little more than what you had Allen for, or what you have Allen for this year.
But that's my point. Like, is the market so depressed that it's worth giving up a first and a third just to keep your backup goalie?
Absolutely not. I mean, if they said, here's a second, because we got a shit ton of seconds in this draft, they said, give us a second, you can keep Allen. Maybe I'd think about it.
Or maybe, it would almost be worth a first if they would take a different contract.
Paul
we're
Byron.
going to give you a first if you take Paul Byron.
Yeah.
To save some cap, because you're saving that cap and you're protecting your guy.
And their first pick's the 30th pick overall.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a crapshoot anyway.
That could almost be believable, but give me a first and a third so I don't pick your goalie, but I'm going to pick this other guy. No. You're just throwing away good money with the bad. And
Agreed.
Bergevin in the last expansion draft did not make a side deal. He basically, what he said was, well, Beaulieu is probably going to get picked. I'm trading him to Buffalo for a third and pick whoever the hell you want from there. And they took Emelin. There was a ton of people that were really, really angry, thinking that Udon was going to be lost. And, we don't want to lose Udon. And then they pick Emelin, who they didn't even keep. They flipped him to Nashville for a third round pick. So, yeah. And this also points to the fact that the team is a much better team now versus then. Because when Udon was the guy you're worried about losing, and you look at the team we got now, he's done a pretty decent job in improving the team.
I mean, it all depends on who those 7 forwards they're going to protect.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If for some reason Lekkonen's not protected, I can see Seattle jumping on that.
And I have no issue with that. Lekkonen can be replaced.
And I can see Drouin being not protected. I would protect Drouin myself, but I can see why he wouldn't be and why he would be picked.
I mean, there's very different reasons why Drouin won't be picked. He could be picked because Seattle may not touch him with a 10-foot pole with everything that's going on. Yeah. And Montreal could be like, we got this guy. Or he could be left unprotected because Montreal was like, Jonathan, maybe the best thing for you is to go somewhere else. Maybe Drouin's like, I think the best thing for me is to go somewhere else. We won't protect you. Maybe Seattle will pick you up, and you can because there's a lot of potential, and I don't think that would be a bad pickup by Seattle. There's so much potential in Drouin, and
Yep.
he's only 26 years old.
Matt, what do you think the response would be in Montreal if Drouin goes to Seattle and puts up a 60-point season?
The only thing we would hear about is Sergachev. We're already hearing about it now, and the fact that he's got 2 cups, and Drouin hasn't. I'm going to say hasn't really lived up to expectations since coming over and being the big Quebec star and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's what you would hear throughout the media and throughout the fan base. You would hear about Sergachev, and you would hear about Montreal giving up on another Quebec-born player. Because so for me, if they do lose him, they've got to immediately jump into the forward market and replace that, because Tatar's not likely coming back. There's a chance that Deneau might come back, etc. So you're losing multiple forwards that got you to the playoffs, not necessarily got you through the playoffs. And there's some big names out there that Bergevin would have to be very. He would have to be very aggressive throughout free agency to continue to keep the Canadians let's say in contention.
And having a francophone on the roster, so like maybe an offer sheet to Beauvillier in New York.
Yeah, always the offer sheet.
There's going to be an offer sheet to
Savishnetka
or whatever his name is out of Carolina.
Sebastian Aho.
Well, yeah, Carolina's ripe for an offer sheet as well. But if you want to keep a francophone, I mean, Beauvillier from the Islanders is right there. The Islanders are going to be having some trouble. And what better way to piss off Uncle Lou than to offer sheet him?
Take my GM of the Year award, will you? Bing! That way, I mean, actually, the French thing's going to be a big thing coming up too, because if they lose both Deneau and Drouin, there is no French-speaking players on the Montreal Canadiens main roster. Ton of them in Laval, but none on the main roster.
And we remember the gong show in the media when they went one game without a francophone dressed for the team.
The first time in the 111-year franchise history that they never had a francophone on the team. But anyway, I'm not going to get into the language debate on this show. But
all good. Paul Barnes still speaks French. We're good to go.
But he's not But he's not Quebecois.
It's all good.
But that language debate thing is going to be a factor, in my opinion, in the protection list.
I totally agree.
That is partially why. That's partially why I don't think Drouin is going to be exposed.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the only way Drouin's exposed is if they know Deneau's coming back.
But they don't know that.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know that.
Well,
we don't.
Today, what if, because Seattle has that window where they could negotiate with any free agent, which would include Deneau. If Deneau is not on the protection list, they can talk to him. And I mean, he'd be a perfect addition to a new franchise, and they could offer him more than $5 million a year, which is well beyond what I think the Canadians are offering him right now.
As well beyond what anyone should offer him. Like, maybe I'm the wrong guy. Maybe this is what's the word I'm looking for? Bad take. But anything over $5 million for Deneau, I think, is a waste for a guy who only scores 12 goals a year.
So some of the numbers that are coming out right now during these free agent talks are just absurd.
Yeah.
You have a flat cap. You have a guy who, don't get me wrong, great defensive center. But if he's looking for close to Bergevin money, but not producing at Bergeron levels, right? Like, the guy's never scored more than 54 points in a season, and he's never scored more than 14 goals. To me, that's not a $6 million player. That's a 5 or less.
Well,
and Nugent Hopkins took 5.14.
Yeah,
exactly, and he scores much more than he's a 20 goal scorer almost annually. So if Deneau's going to go out and ask for any more than $5 million, if I'm Montreal, I walk away. Say, all right, you got Jake Evans coming up. You got Ryan Poehling. I think, Blaine, you hit the nail on the head about the playoffs. Jake Evans is being trained or put in a position to see if he can replace Deneau. And I don't think he's far off, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because the Canadians, I mean, Evans can fill in some of that defensive role. Suzuki can definitely do it. Kotkaniemi is going to get an expanded role. You have Paling coming up. Vedemo is good defensively. He can fill in a fourth line role. It's not like the Canadians don't have options. I mean, clearly experience is a factor, and Dano being a over 50% face-off man and a proven shutdown man and Selke vote getter, yeah, that's worth something. He's a local. It's worth something, but it's not worth money beyond what his role actually is. He's a third line center with a shutdown role. So you pay him that. Give him more term. I have no problem. I mean, he's only 27. So you want to give him a 5-6 year term, go for it. But anything past 4, in my opinion, and you're hurting yourself in the flat cap.
No, I totally agree. And I don't know where Dano is, where he thinks he should get, but I'm pretty sure. And if Bergevin turns back to 2017 Bergevin, the $5 million is the final straw. And if you take it one any more than that, you're going somewhere else.
Well, he already turned down the 5x6.
Yeah. You want loyalty by a dog.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, and if by some chance Deno is not protected, and if by some chance he signs with Seattle, that is Seattle's pick from the Canadiens roster.
Correct. Yeah.
So Allen's safe. Now, I think we'll move from that back to the Weber stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about replacing him. I mean, we've got a guy who plays heavy minutes in all situations. You can't replace his leadership. You can't replace the culture that he has created in that room, but you have to look at the on ice and the Canadiens' needs. So they need somebody who can fill those minutes. And I'm going to start with you, Matt, and ask you an option on who you think would be a good fit in filling in Weber's current role as the second pairing right-handed defenseman who can play in all situations.
If they lose Weber and Weber goes to the retirement and they obviously lose that money, Bergevin, in my opinion, you be as aggressive as you can to look at Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah. Dougie Hamilton.
There's your guy that eats minutes. He's good for. He's not a guy that's had to play 25 plus. He's more of like a 21 to 20 21 22 guy, but in an expanded role with he would help your power play. He could put up points. He could play top 4 minutes. He's a big body, etc. As long as he can stay healthy, I think that would be your target. The only thing is you're going to end up paying a UFA premium, and that could be a little bit scary.
Yeah. So Carolina gave him permission to talk to other teams early, like already.
Yeah.
It's been about a month since they've been eliminated, and since then he's been able to talk to other teams.
Yeah.
What do you think is the premium that would have to be paid to get him into Montreal?
They'd be looking at probably. Just let me look. Just one second. I need a comparable. Just give me 2 seconds. Just so off the top of my head, I can get kind of the same amount. I personally believe he'd be looking at Pietrangelo type money.
So above 8.
He's making 5.7 on his last contract. Was 5.7.
Right,
he's looking at a raise.
Pietrangelo's making 8.8. Yeah. Obviously, Pietrangelo's got a cup. He was captain of his team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The year that he got his big deal, he put up 52 points. This year he did 23 and 41, then put up 12 and 19 in the playoffs. I don't think he's at that number yet, but I think he would be north of 7.5. Probably somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5, more than likely. Especially since he's still a young guy. Like Pietrangelo's 31 now, and Hamilton will be.
He's 28.
He'll be 29. Yeah, he's 28. Yeah. He just turned 28 last month. Yeah.
Yeah, but Hamilton had 42 points in 55 games last year. He's a guaranteed 40 to 60 point defenseman.
He shoots a hell of a lot.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. He's similar to Pietrangelo in his style.
Yep.
But but Peter Angelo, when he signed in Vegas, keep in mind Vegas doesn't have that state tax, so
That's
they're
right.
already ahead of the game.
That's right.
He's got more take home. So
Yeah.
for the Canadians to kind of give a similar contract for Dougie Hamilton, I would say they'd be close to $9 million.
I wouldn't do it.
And I'm not talking like 4 years. I'm talking
I know,
7 years.
Yeah, it'd be.
He's getting a
stretched
max
out.
deal.
Now, Dougie Hamilton, according to Hockey Reference, is an 82 game average of 46 points and 14 goals. So he's personally, I wouldn't give him any more than 8.5. He's basically scoring at the same rate as Shea Weber is now.
But he's a
However-
Toronto kid, so he's obviously going to want to go to Toronto first.
Everyone's going to Toronto.
Everyone's
But,
going there. Landeskog, Hamilton, they're all going there.
Apparently, Marc-Andre Fleury's going there now. That's the
Yes.
new one. Yeah.
And the other thing you
There you go.
have to talk about too with Dougie Hamilton is his off ice. He's not a team type guy. He doesn't like to. He's very introvert, very lonerish, very.
He's very low key. He's very he keeps to himself, but he's a low maintenance type of guy too. He's not he doesn't cause problems.
Correct. I'm not saying he does, but I'm
Yeah.
saying I don't know if he'd want to be in a market like Montreal. Is what I'm trying to say.
That's a thing. That is
Right?
definitely
So,
a thing.
He may be available, and Montreal might say, "Here's $8.5 million." He might say, "I'd rather play in Anaheim than play in Montreal or wherever." Right. So that's kind of what I look at with Dougie Hamilton. The negative, I guess, there is that he may not want a big market like Montreal. Just
But how many
because of
other
those-
teams have the cap and the need and the ability to win?
There's not, and I get everything you're saying. I'm just being devil's advocate here and throwing out what might keep him away from Montreal is the tax
Yep. Tax
And
and
the
the
fact-
media bowl, the media fish
and the
bowl.
media bowl that Dougie Hamilton does not enjoy, right? I think that's why he didn't stay in Boston. So take that for what it's worth.
The only thing I'm going to say right now is one player they got to stay away from is Tyson Barrie.
I was going to
Oh.
ask you, how much do you love Tyson Barrie?
Oh,
All right, they
Tyson
gotta-
Barrie's numbers are, if you take McDavid out of the equation,
Yeah.
his numbers are trash.
Yeah,
You take Tyson Barrie off the power play, and no.
he didn't even get a Norris vote.
Because he's not. He literally
know.
lived
He-
off
he-
McDavid and
But he
Draisaitl.
led the league. He led the league in scoring for defensemen, and didn't get a Norris vote.
Because he can't play defense.
Can't play defense. Yeah,
And 90% of his point came from the power play / McDavid Draisaitl.
that's right.
So it's basically, here, guys,
right.
scores. I mean, I could have probably got 20 points playing with
That's
Dave-
my
McDavid
style
and
of hockey.
Draisaitl.
Hey, look, that guy's really good passing the puck.
Blaine could have been the, Yari Curry of Edmonton playing with Draisaitl and McDavid.
And I would fill water bottles. See, give me a call, Ken Holland.
But,
I know that we brought this up before, and I know you wrote an article about it, Blaine, about bringing in Martinez, but that's left side help. That's left side help, and that's obviously before we knew about the Weber situation.
Yeah,
But even with the Weber situation, you could almost fill both. Martinez isn't going to come at the price that Dougie Hamilton is.
No,
Martinez also plays both sides. So if you're going to be aggressive, you got to find something that kind of fits what you need and can be a little bit more versatile.
Yeah.
Now, Martinez is a name. Another name that I've seen bandied about being in the trade circulation is Nate Schmidt. Vancouver's looking to move Nate Schmidt out, and I think he's left-handed, but he plays solely on the right side. I think he would be an excellent fit on a second pair in Montreal. He's a good puck mover. He's not big. He's not physical, but here's a guy who feasts on the transition game, and the Canadians are built for it. That is the Canadians' bread and butter.
And you just brought a good point up, Blaine, is we're not looking for a first pairing defenseman
No.
to replace Weber, because Petrie's going to do that.
That's
We're
right.
looking for a second pairing defenseman to replace Weber. So you really don't have to go out and grab a guy like Dougie Hamilton or trade for a guy like Seth Jones. You could actually drop the bar a bit and go after a guy like Schmidt, Denny Savard, for instance, out of Columbus.
I have a feeling he's going to be a Montreal Canadian.
Savard.
Yeah.
I think he's a good second pair defenseman, and I think playing a Montreal system would benefit him. But I think that's who Dougie Hamilton would be nice. He'd be great, but you don't need to go after that top line, top pairing defenseman. You need just.
But
I
I think Matt makes a good point, though. If you got that money, try, be aggressive, and
for sure.
If you can have Petrie and Hamilton, well, the Canadians' defense looks that much better.
Yeah. When it comes to defense, however, they start losing guys like Deneau, Tatar's not coming back, Drouin's not coming back, etc. You're starting to throw eggs in the basket of picking up forwards.
Doesn't matter.
And that's when you need to be aggressive to come more towards the forward mark of the defense.
Ovechkin and Landeskog are coming to Montreal. It's a guarantee. I said it here first. They're getting both.
I've been a Landeskog fan since he jumped in the league. Saw him playing junior, and I've been a fan of his forever. I would welcome him with open arms. Is it going to happen? More than likely not. But this is
where I think the trade market works better for the Canadians on defense, and like I brought up, second pairing guys what they need.
Another name
Nate
that
Schmidt really is that guy. It gives you more money to put up front.
Another name that I heard a little bit of ramblings because plays on a shitty team, and there's been ramblings for many years that he's wanted out, is Ristolainen, and he's only got a year left on his deal. And
he demanded a trade now 2 years in a row.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I think it wouldn't be so bad. A good young defenseman.
I think he makes 5.4 or something like that for one more year, and he's going to be a guy that he wouldn't have to be the number one guy. He could be a second pair, and he could put up some points here and there, depending on who you got playing with him on the left-hand side. Help him out a little bit defensively, because defensively he's not the greatest defenseman, to be honest, but he'll hit you through the boards and he'll put up points.
But if you're keeping Ben Sherratt, if Ben Sherratt's being protected, there's your pairing.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's your second pairing.
Evanson Petrie is your top pairing. Sherratt, or unless they get that puck moving left-handed defenseman for the top pair, like Martinez. If Martinez in there, he's definitely your top pair defenseman. But Montreal has the money, like you said, Matt, where they can. And I agree with you, Matt. I think if you can get that one defenseman, I'd stick with that and then concentrate the rest of the money on the forward group. Yeah. But Blaine, again, you make a good point. Trade for your defenseman. Yeah. Spend your money on UFA forwards.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is going to be very important for them is to ensure that Romanov is going to be in your lineup, and put him with somebody that you can. I'm not going to say you can shelter him, but put someone that he can learn from, or put someone that he can play his game and the other guy can play his, and not really, you know what I mean? Like, don't have the revolving door of defensive partners and then just try to blame Romanov for a mistake that's been happening.
And that's what I was, when I said, I feel like Savard is going to be a Montreal Canadian.
Savard could definitely be one.
Yeah. And that's why I say it, because I think that he's going to be on a pairing with Romanov.
That could very well happen.
And then you have Kulak as your seventh guy, or trade it off.
Because again, if you trade for that second pairing guy, I mean, like I mentioned, Schmidt's under $6 million. That gives you enough money to pick up a more expensive defenseman to help mentor Romanov, and it provides money on the wings. And wingers are less expensive to acquire in free agency than centers and defensemen.
Yeah, it's and Savard and. Savard I'm not gonna say he plays a similar style, but he's a physical shutdown guy, and it would allow Romanov, depending on the matchup that he has, to play to do kind of a match of that pairing, or open up and play his game and be a little bit more of a two-way guy as opposed to just being the shutdown role.
And it's not a third pairing anymore. It's not that traditional third pairing anymore. It's more of the Tampa Bay style third pairing, where they can play up higher against better opposition. They can eat more minutes in some nights, and depending on roles. So it's a more equitable breakdown of minutes, which saves the body a little bit through a longer season. So that is why I think they're going to go that
and
direction.
You'd get your Quebec-born player, French-speaking player.
Bingo.
And someone that used to play for the Moncton Wildcats.
And by the way, I said Denny Savard and I meant David Savard.
That's
Just
all
throwing that
good.
out
We
there.
can bring him back too. So
We know who you meant.
yeah.
So, all right. I think we've pretty much exhausted all the talk on Shea Weber. To those teams that are complaining about the team, the captain of the Montreal Canadiens, who is one of the most respected players in the NHL, thinking that that person would fake injuries to help a team circumvent the cap.
Yeah.
To them, I say,
Yeah. Those are the same people that had George Peros out there helping the Canadians too.
yeah, exactly.
And I'm gonna-
is just helping.
And they're I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of people saying, yeah, put him on LTIR, then bring him back for the playoffs. I'm almost positive if Weber's going on LTIR, it's going to be for the entire playoffs, season, everything.
Yeah.
Ankle, knee, I think both thumbs are screwed. And I think he has issues on both hands. I mean, this guy elevated his game in the playoffs, and he had more injuries going into the playoffs than he did in the regular season. So he's going to be a great loss. Like we talked about his contract a lot, but it's going to be hard to replace that person and that warrior.
Yeah. You think of the captains that they talk about throughout the league. I'm talking about guys that actually wear the C. Obviously, you can say really great things about Gallagher, Corey Perry, Price, etc. But you talk about guys within the league that actually wear the C, and he's one of those top 3 guys that you talk about. Another guy, obviously, being a guy like Taves, Crosby, etc. It would be a huge loss. It'd be a huge loss to the locker room. Be a huge loss to the organization. Obviously, there would be a hell of a lot of negativity that would come that way, saying that they gave up a fan favorite in Subban to give him and not play out the rest of his contract while Subban's still playing, etc.
Is he though? Is Subban still playing?
But
is he really?
There's got to be those people, right?
If he's so good, we would have mentioned Subban as a possible trade chip.
Right, but the way I see it,
Brendan Kelly.
the way I see it, the team that we just saw make it to the Cup final, it's going to be a very different team. It could be. It could very well be a very different team, and there's so much speculation out there. Don't want to speculate too much. Obviously, we're going to know a lot more next week of the direction that this team's going to go. But I'll just end my little spat on Weber and say, like, he's been one of my favorite players since he's joined the league. When I found out that he was joining the Canadiens, I was over the moon. I was extremely excited about the identity shift that he could bring to the Canadiens, and he's done just that. And if this is the end of him, either with the Canadiens or with him in general playing in this league, I wish him nothing but the best. And he's a guy that, in my opinion, he's a Hall of Famer, and he'll be missed if he leaves.
I mean, you look at Pekka Rinne just retired, and in his Players Tribune article that he wrote, he dedicated a full third of his entire article to Shea Weber and what he meant to him as a player, him as a person, Nashville as a city and as a team, what he did to transform that team into a true hockey market and a professional franchise. Like, we're talking about a guy who basically created an entire team just off of his leadership and personality. That's those intangibles that you just can't put an advanced stat to. It's those things that really made the difference. And that also kind of points at Rinne probably knows what's going on, and basically it was just throwing bouquets of flowers at a friend, knowing that what he's going to be going through. So that's the kind of player that Weber is. That's the stuff that you're going to miss. New guys showing up in town. Him and his wife are picking guys up at airports, bringing them to his house, putting them up for a couple of days while they get set up, having team barbecues and meetings, and these little things make a difference. And that's what builds a culture.
But Blaine, if he was a good leader, he wouldn't have played injured. The leadership in Montreal this season was trash, according to Montreal social media, Twitter, during the season.
Yeah. And as people who have day jobs where you don't really have replacements coming up, you have to work hurt. If you're injured and you're deployed, you battle through. You do what you have to do. And that's what these guys, that's their mentality.
Yeah, especially Weber's.
Yes. So I had immense respect for the man before, and then watching what he did through the playoffs and then finding out what he was playing through. Just, I didn't think it was possible, but I respect him more. So yeah, I agree, Matt. It's a massive, massive loss. It's not about cap hits and rolls anymore on the ice.
No,
It's more than that.
Yeah.
So I think we'll end here. Any final thoughts, Trey?
No.
Awesome.
For me, it kind of cuts down the whole Ryan Suter coming to Montreal to play with Shea Weber rumor that I tried to start, but I would still welcome him. Him and David Savard. There you go.
Ryan Suter coming to Montreal to play in tribute of
There you go. There you go. And yeah, so there you go. Suter and Savard. You're French speaker. You got a veteran. There you go. You heard it here first.
Yeah, all right. So we'll end the show there. I want to remind everyone that they can find Habs Unfiltered on all social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We have a TikTok account and OnlyFans.
I knew the OnlyFans. I didn't know we had a TikTok.
Yeah, I started a TikTok account.
Interesting.
I figured the kids are doing it now. I want to see what all these NHL influencers are like. And I went on TikTok to check out this latest one, and I'm this close to deleting TikTok.
I have no desire.
We did the same thing with OnlyFans, so we were like, everybody's doing it.
I figure the Tiger team's on TikTok, so I'm staying far away from it. So.
Fair enough. For those who want to save some money and purchase some great items, use a code unfiltered20 to save yourself 10% from builtbar.com. They have amazing protein bars. They just came out with a grasshopper flavor. It's basically mint chocolate. It's something grasshopper. I don't know. I saw it.
I've had actual grasshopper, so that'd be interesting.
So have I. Caramel covered.
That was chocolate.
So builtbar.com, 10% off your purchase. They ship directly to your house. East Coast Lifestyle. Use Unfiltered20 at East Coast Lifestyle, and you'll save 20% off your online purchase. And keeping with that same code Unfiltered20, you go to seatgiant.ca and you will save 35% off all your purchasing fees from Seat Giant when buying tickets for concerts, sporting events, anything that they sell on their website. That's Unfiltered20 for all three. So use that, save some money, and help us out a little bit. Also, I'd like to mention that we have donated $325 to the Canadians Children's Foundation. It's official. We use the money that we earned from this show to donate to them. So we're going to start building up our funds again for next year. We're going to put aside $400, $25 for every win. That's 16 wins for you people that don't want to do math. Figure it out. So we'll be set for next season. But I want to thank everyone for listening. And remember, if you are talking about it, so are we.